People calculate risks all day long when they value the outcome. People calculate career risks, the risks of a consumer purchase. People even calculate traffic stops. But when a child's education comes up, people suddenly act like the topic is impossible to evaluate. Why are we willing to trust ourselves with thousands of decisions that affect our lives, but not trust ourselves to participate in our children's education? If you're new here, karibu, a big Swahili welcome to you. My name is Yahaira, and this channel is about building a regenerative way of living. I share my journey as an educator, filmmaker, birth worker, and future homesteader building what I call kin and soil. So let's get into it. Let's not waste any time. I've seen this phenomenon in my life like forever, and I think it's a great example for the kind of excuses that people make. So in the US, we have a very robust system of stoplights, which are held together by a very intricate timing system. So like when the light turns yellow, people all of a sudden can calculate the velocity that's needed to beat the red light, or even just to beat the red light, you know, sometimes just with enough time so that you can run from this light to the next light when the cross intersection light turns green. So I know I'll be safe. And I use this example because it's kind of like a calculated risk, you know. When you run a red light, if you're good at it, you're not gonna hit anybody in front of you, and nobody's gonna hit you or like T-bone you, because you figured out a way to calculate how much time, speed, and velocity that you need to cross the threshold to get to the other side, you know, either before the light turns red or right when it's turning red. And I just find it interesting, like the majority of people in America know how to do this, but they won't decide to homeschool their children, or even if they don't want to get as far as homeschooling their children, like they automatically make it seem like they don't know how to calculate the risks for what's needed in order to be an asset for their children. And I should also point out that when I talk about people homeschooling their children, I'm speaking specifically to Black Americans or other people that live in locations that are in a high racial tension. You know, I've said it before and I've said it again. You're sending your children out to the wolves every day when you send them to school in America. And this is coming from a teacher who works in schools in America, okay? To me, it seems like people are much more comfortable outsourcing their responsibility of rearing their children than exercising true freedom. And therein lies the problem, okay? So what's my educational philosophy? It is to be as much of an asset as you can to your children and stop outsourcing responsibility to the iPad, to the teacher, to everyone else except you to teach your child. Generally speaking, from my observation, children learn by observation, okay? Especially before the ages of 7. Children are picking up everything that you do, even, you know, how you flick your pen when you write, to the nervous tick that you have while you're sitting. You know, I've even had one student ask me one time, she said, "Miss D, why do you have tea every morning? You don't drink soda?" I said, "No, baby, soda's not good for you, especially in the morning." And then she proceeds to tell me the entire list of food and drinks that her mom has throughout the day. That's one example out of many. She was in the first grade. This student was in the first grade. But then another time, I remember that the doctor had told me that there may be something wrong with my liver. So I got the call from the doctor while I was in class in 3rd period. So I put the phone on speaker so that my students knew that I was not ignoring them and they knew that it was something important. Afterwards, the students, you know, came around me to give me hugs and sympathy when I hung up the phone. And they asked me what I'm gonna do. And I basically said to them, I'm gonna switch up from the bush tea that I'm taking and I'm gonna start on licorice root tea. And they all looked at me like, what? That's it? You know, is that gonna be enough? Is that gonna work? And sure enough, 3 months later, I was taking the, you know, licorice root, and whenever I took the test again, my blood test came back that there was no signs of whatever, you know. So whatever this inflammation was, I still don't know to this day what it was, but I don't have to know because I took the licorice root tea. So mind you, this was the first time I believe that my students were hearing this, because After that, all of that, this was like, I don't know, November. Then we came back January, something like that, February. Sure enough, they started asking me like, okay, what tea do I take for this? What tea do I, and it was mostly for like acne and digestive stuff. But I say all that to say that this was a learning process within the learning process. Okay. And these were high school students. So I'm saying K through 12, all the children, they're constantly watching you, constantly watching everything that you do. And this is another reason why for me, I feel like being a teacher is like the best production that you can be in, because you're not just bringing knowledge, you're bringing whimsy, okay? And you're bringing like this sharing of your world, sharing of your life, I kind of see it as like method acting also, because to be a good teacher, like you have to be sincere. You have to share your life with your students. And if you grew up in the US, you'll notice Miss Frizzle was always taking her students on field trips also. Okay, so there was this idea that there was observation, the scientific method for sure, but there was observation, which is a big part of the scientific method. Observation, observation, observation. Your children are observing everything that you do, and it's not just in the school day. It is when they get home. It is how you put them to bed. It is how you engage with them on the weekend. It's everything. They're looking at every single thing from every single adult that they have in their life. I think there's also this idea that people have that school happens like in a building and away from society. And like school has to look this way, the desks have to be in rows, the bell schedule, all of that. And that's one old framework of school. Okay, but the best schools, in my opinion, are the ones where life is not siloed away or compartmentalized within the school day. Okay, the new model, the model that I embody, the closest thing that I can call it would be a mix between land-based learning and liberatory education. So let me break down these two so we can all have a better understanding. Okay, so liberatory education was popularized by Paulo Freire, a Brazilian educator. And it's essentially a socio-political framework that's focused on empowering learners to question and dismantle oppressive systems. So I know I said a lot of big words just now, so let me paint some examples of what this looks like in practice. So Paulo Freire talks about what he calls banking education. And that's simply a teacher depositing information into a child. That teacher acts like the depositor and the child acts like a bank. Okay, so usually it's in this position of like a passive empty vessel. So the teacher has all the knowledge and it's being passed on to the child. And what this looks like is like rote memorization in the classroom, which is conforming to basically one answer. So you juxtapose that to problem posing education, which takes more of like an inquiry method approach. Basically, in problem posing education, the teacher is learning with the students and not standing as an expert delivering the information. It's not like that. The student is an active participant, and the class is continuously engaging in dialogue to solve real world problems. So this empowers students to become critical thinkers and people who challenge injustice, okay? So all of this can be read in Education for Critical Consciousness and the Pedagogy of Freedom, which I will link below. So that's liberatory education, popularized by Paulo Freire. Land-based learning, on the other hand, is rooted in indigenous cosmology, where the land itself is the primary teacher. So the land teaches us how to liberate ourselves through observation. Land-based learning centers reciprocal relationships, cultural survival, traditional ecological knowledge, and responsibility. So humans are seen as an intrinsic part of the ecology and not like away from it, not separate from it. And I like land-based learning because it emphasizes to revive knowledge that's been lost and to decolonize by reconnecting people with their ancestral territories. So land-based learning was popularized by tribal groups in North America but I think it is something that all First Nation people can adopt in their locales, because it teaches us, well, at least it's taught me, that we are indigenous and ancestral to planet Earth first, and that we are connected with her, you know? And I also come from like the Free Willy Captain Planet generation, so I'm always gonna go hard for Mother Earth. Like when I got the language around, I was like, oh, that's what I've been doing all these years. Because these two pedagogies is where I have landed after 10 plus years of teaching in classrooms, I think the best way to teach our children is each one teach one, okay? Each parent, each community, teaching each child as close to home as possible. And at some point, I will be navigating this with my own children. And I'm so glad that I've had the time to really work through these things before I had children. I'm sure that my educational philosophy will like keep evolving and improving, but this is where I'm at today. So I'm curious to know what you think about that. What comes up for you when you hear an educator saying that you need to homeschool your children? I want to know. And I also want you to hit the subscribe button, because I want you to keep the conversation going with me. And in the spirit of this video, I'm going to be re-releasing some of my old YouTube videos. I talked about this before. I had a YouTube channel called Curly Catalyst, and I was doing read alouds of picture books that I was using in my classroom to teach my students English and grammar and writing and all of that. So I'm going to re-release those videos so that you can see what I've been doing for a decade plus. A decade plus, y'all, a decade plus. So anyway, sending love to all benevolent beings. Go and touch some grass with your people. AMANI na UPENDO.